Hello class, my name is Jacob Bradshaw. I'm here presenting jQuery Ajax. Now, what is Ajax? Well, Ajax stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Now, the best way to think of Ajax is that it is an HTTP request, similar to the API calls that we have made earlier in this class, where we access the openweather.org site to receive the weather data for our Franklin, our Greenville, and our Springfield pages, along with the API calls that we are making to the BYU site to receive the city data. Ajax is a simpler way, and it does a lot of the work for you that you don't actually have to do, and it saves you lines of code and saves you typing. So, to give you an example of what we are looking at, we have our start function in our jQuery file. Now, Ajax is a method of JavaScript, so we call jQuery. So we call the jQuery and we type Ajax. Now, Ajax will take many different parameters, and the two main ones is the URL and then the options. Okay. The URL is pretty self-explanatory. It is the URL that we want the request to access. So in the case of earlier this semester, it would be the Open Weather API or the BYU site. Now, there are many different options. The list of options accepted for this function is very long, and there's very handy ones, and there's a lot of different things that you can do with this. A few of the ones that I wanted to cover today is one, the data option. The data option specifies what type of request you are sending to the server. So you can say data, I'm sending as JSON. Whatever you then send to the server in the request would be in JSON format. Another one that I will show in an example later on is data type. The data type option specifies the type of data that is expected back from the server. So if you need the response to be in JSON, or if you need it to be in XML, you then state that using the data type. And again, I'll show you that in another example. One of the other ones that is really helpful is the success function. And it is a function that is then called if the request is successful. That's pretty handy. Some of the other ones are data filter, which data filter is a function that is used to handle the raw response data of the request. You can use contents, which is an object that determines how the library will parse the response. There's many other ones like error, which is the opposite of success, and it's a function that is called if the call errors out and is not accessible. Like I said, there's many other ones. You can provide a password if you need to access an authenticated URL. You can provide the password and the username. You can use one that's called timeout, and that specifies a timeout. So if the request is taking too long, or you need to access it in a certain amount of time, then use the timeout to specify that time. So let me give you an example, a real-world example that I've used at my office. We use a ticketing system called Jira, and we wanted to pull a lot of data out of Jira. And unfortunately, that API, you can only pull 100 records at a time. And so what we did was we created a call that would then loop through itself and continually call that API, the Jira API, so that we could pull all of the data that we wanted to. And so these options that I've talked about, this is a good example, and you'll see those. Now it looks kind of complex here, but I'll walk you through it. So we start with our Ajax or our jQuery start function. We then call the Ajax method. We provide the method, which by default this is a get. I've removed the URL just for security purposes, but this would be the URL to the Jira API. And then we provide the data that we want to then send in the request. And this data helps us to pull what we want. This is using a jQuery format. And so we can specify what type of project we're looking for, what the start date is, what the created date. Then we specify the fields that we want to pull. We want to pull created date. We want to pull issue type and severity and whatnot. Okay? And that goes on off the page. And then once that request is successful, we call the success function. And we pass in simply data. That is the data that has been returned to us from the server. And then we manipulate it from here on out in the script file. We then loop back through this function, call a different time period. The dates are set to increment. Excuse me. And so that's what allows us to pull different records each time. But this is kind of a real-world example of using this Ajax call. And it's very simple, and it allows you to do a lot less coding, less typing, and get a lot of functionality out of it. A lot of power in that method. There are other jQuery methods that you might have heard about, like get, post, or load. These types of methods, jQuery methods, use this Ajax call. But, of course, on the back end, you don't actually have to see that Ajax call when you use one of those. But this is really simple, and it's really helpful. Hopefully you guys use it often and can take the scripts that you have used on your other sites and modify them to then use jQuery and to use this Ajax call.